Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head and Chris Clark along with you on this Tuesday morning. Jump into some portal conversation here in just a second. But, Chris, I know you're starving. I can't let you leave until 12 o'clock. But when you do get out of here, you make your way down to Firehouse Subs.
That'd be funny if I was like, you know what, I'm so overwhelmed by the Firehouse Subs menu that I'm leaving,
well,
and you're on your own.
You would not be the first Gamecock Central employee to leave in the middle of a show. Did I ever tell you about
to get lunch?
No, not to get lunch.
Oh.
Kendall, who of course had 83 jobs.
Yes, she did.
We were in the middle of doing a show, and it was like 9:30 when we used to do the in the bonus last year.
Mm-hmm.
And she looks up in the middle of the break and says, "Hey, I'm sorry, I gotta go," and didn't tell me where she was going. I found out later she had I think a Hurricanes press conference that she thought was later in the day, so she had to jet up to Charlotte really quick. But yeah, she just left in the middle of the show. And I was like, all right, just me for the next 30 minutes.
Well, here's the good news, though. I am hungry, but because there's a Firehouse Subs right up the road.
Yep.
633 Main. We've been there, the USC campus location. And I can use the Rapid Rescue to order online. So if I want to order online, it's waiting on me when I go in. Chips in the bag, sandwich in the bag, grab my drink, use the cool Coca-Cola Freestyle machine, get my drink, and I'm on my way. You can go check out the new barbecue Cuban sub. It's here for a limited time. Southern roots with the Cuban twist. There's a Firehouse Subs location no matter where you are, pretty close to you. Just go to firehousesubs.com. You can use their store locator. Find the closest one next to you or download the Firehouse Subs app. You can earn yourself some rewards on future purchases. And again, use the Rapid Rescue to go to avoid the wait and order online.
As I mentioned a few minutes ago, today is the final day seeing your name into the transfer portal for the spring window. And that does not mean you have to commit somewhere. As long as your name's in the portal, you're good. You can make your commitment in due time. But, you know, for South Carolina, who, again, you know, was a little bit behind in terms of wrapping up spring ball compared to some of these other schools that had finished things up before the portal opened 2 weeks ago. I'm standing here right now, and we talked about both these guys last week. Really the only notable names going in the portal for South Carolina as of right now, unless somebody else enters today, seem to be Sidney Fugar and Keenan Nelson Jr., which would both qualify under that healthy transfer, you know, list that Wes talks about all the time.
Yeah, very, very much so. I think, you know, to some degree, if you're a college coach, you're crossing your fingers and all that good stuff during this spring window. It's a little bit of a shorter window. As we've discussed, it has, I think, helped a lot of the SEC teams that the SEC to SEC transfer is really practically is eliminated in this window because you'd have to sit out, and nobody wants to do that in the year 2024.
Right.
And so that helps. And so that was kind of the question is, you know, would South Carolina to be – we expected that there were going to be some of these healthy transfers. And so but what you really needed and wanted was to come out of this unscathed as far as losing a starter, losing a key backup guy, losing a key, you know, young player who you could envision – stepping up and playing a bigger role. And so far we haven't seen that. Now, a couple things to keep in mind. It's still open until, I guess, midnight.
Yes.
The other thing is a player can still put his name, request, you know, when you go to your school's compliance department, they have to put your name in. They can't say, no thanks, or I don't want to do that. They have to do it. And it can take, I think, up to 48 hours. So in theory, it is possible you could see some guys go in today, tonight, put their name in, and then, you know, over the next couple of days, those leak out, trickle out, announcement made, whatever. Now, I haven't, I'm going to be honest, I have not heard of any other additional ones. We're constantly monitoring that, keeping an eye on it. I haven't heard of any situations that you expect to go the wrong way, but there's still a little bit of time here. So we'll see how it goes. We'll keep tracking it. But for right now, there are a couple guys that we are tracking as far as potential acquisitions for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, and wide receiver was obviously kind of the focal point of this spring cycle where Carolina addressed so many needs, you know, in the December window and did a great job in that. And again, had one of the best transfer portal recruiting classes in the entire country at that point in time. But we kind of looked at what they brought in at receiver, and all those guys kind of around that same 6'5", 5'11" size, still thinking that they need to go out there and maybe get somebody, with length, a little bit more dynamic that can, catch some of those high point contested balls maybe down the field. And one guy that would definitely fit that mold would be Delvon Campbell, who is a guy coming over from Nevada, has 1 year of eligibility, so wanting to come somewhere and hopefully elevate his draft stock in a year in a place like the SEC, and was on campus this past weekend. Yeah,
he took an abbreviated official visit by design. I don't know, why it had to be a little bit shorter, but it was. So was his trip to Oklahoma State. He went to Oklahoma State on Thursday, South Carolina on Friday to, I believe, Saturday morning. And so it was a kind of a quick trip, but from my understanding, a good trip. And really, those two programs are the ones to watch. He's from Texas originally. He's a Houston guy. Actually played high school ball with Devon Achane, who is a very good player.
Yes.
And plays for the Miami Dolphins right now. And very intriguing player, though, because he's 6'4", he's about 220. Nevada's offense has been not good.
The program hasn't been all that good.
He has not been very good, and started his career at Illinois, transferred to Nevada. He's been playing there. And so the numbers aren't like, wow, but the offensive numbers in total for Nevada have not been very good.
Yeah, just kind of looking at the specific breakdowns of what he does on offense, majority of stuff he's catching is down the field. His Pro Football Focus ratings for receiving down the field, 10 yards and plus are relatively good. And again, when you just have that size at 6'4", that wins you a lot of battles, from the get-go, because you're going up against, DBs that are 5'10", 5'11", 6 foot. So having that size is definitely an advantage. And, it's such an interesting conversation because for all we know, Nick Harver could make an enormous jump in year number 2, and he ends up being the wide receiver that we were all, waiting for him to be, to where this isn't as big of a conversation to have. But at this point in time, when there's still uncertainty, you want to at least bring in, I don't want to say a safety valve, but somebody that's a little bit more experienced that can kind of fill that role until Harbour gets where you want him to be.
Well, and I think you just want more. I think there's a couple of things. You want more size, and I think you just want to increase the competition and the talent level. And they brought in some guys from the portal in the winter, I guess you could call it, window, that will help. I mean, Gage Larvidan, Jared Brown, Amari Huggins-Bruce, I think those guys will help this team. But you don't look at it and go, okay, here is 100% your 3 starters, your 2 or 3 starters for this year. We can say what it is right now, but I don't think you really see a scenario where, say, you brought in another guy or 2 from the portal. You don't look at it and say, there's no way that player A or player B from the current roster is not starting.
Right.
Like if Xavier Legette was coming back, you would look at it and go, nobody is unseating Xavier Legette, because they're not.
Sure.
It's more of a question with this team. And so did they get better in terms of adding more guys that could potentially help you, more depth? Yes, they did. But the job's not finished there. You look at like linebacker, you go, okay, like you've reworked that. You feel pretty good about that. Receiver, you're still not there. So Delvon Campbell, and then the other one, Tyler, of course, is Vandrevius Jacobs, the FSU transfer. He's actually on campus right now for a visit.
Right, and he is somebody that, like I said, is at Florida State. Limited production so far. Again, his first year in college, 4-star guy coming out of high school. So we don't know as much about him at the college level, but that potential upside for what he was as a high school prospect is certainly enticing. Now, he's listed at 6', 175, so he very much kind of falls in line with the Jared Browns and Larvadans, guys like that as far as a size standpoint goes. But if you're not able to bring in somebody like a Delvon Campbell, bringing in Jacobs, would, as you said, be more competition for that room.
Yeah, it would. And Jacobs, he doesn't fit that profile of, you generally thought they're mostly going to be looking at guys who are 6'2", or above. And that has been mostly, to be fair, that is mostly what they've been looking at in the portal. But then Jacobs pops up. And a couple of things. I mean, number one, he was a pretty highly rated guy Mike Norvell from FSU had a lot of good things to say about him last spring as an early enrollee. And he also played at the same high school program as Gilbert Edmond, who returned from FSU to the Gamecocks this offseason. And so a couple, there's a connection there that makes sense. And he's also a guy that, has a lot of ability. And you look at him and go, this guy could help us. Yeah, he's not 6'2", he's more like 6 foot, but he could come in and compete and make some plays for you.
So again, those are the two focal points for South Carolina in the transfer portal as of right now. We will see if they're able to land either one of those guys here going forward. We will jump back into the conversation about Gamecocks going to the NFL, perhaps some clarification on why Spencer Rattler ended up going in the 5th round to the New Orleans Saints. Adam Schefter of ESPN gives his thoughts. We'll hear that coming up next. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Tuesday on the Game.